Alright, so we'll begin. Melicha, Siman. Today we're preparing liver. That's what's on the menu. Din Sliata Kaved. How to prepare liver properly, how to make it kosher. There's an interesting Gemara, Maseches Chulin Kuf Tes Omed Beis, that reads as follows. Kol da'asalan nachmana sharon kavosei. Anything that the Torah forbids, there is something that is like it, that it permitted it. On the one hand, it prohibits a particular, food item, and on the other hand, there's something similar to that which is forbidden, that is mutter. So in case you ever were curious about the flavor of bacon, as an example, there is something that corresponds or is similar to it at the other end that would be kosher. So the Gemara gives a list of such items that have been forbidden and something that is similar to it that is permissible. For example, what we'll learn today, dama, blood is asur, sharlon kavdo, but liver is mutter. And liver is all blood, as I'll explain. Niddah is asur, dam tohar is mutter. The blood that is called dam tohar, which is after a certain amount of time, after the birth, after a woman gives birth, that dam is tohar. So you have blood that is permissible, not that you can eat it, this type of blood, but one is tam and one is not. You have, for example, chelev behema is asur, the certain fats that are forbidden by an animal, but chelev chaya is mutter, of a deer. You don't have to treber, you don't have to remove the chelev of a chaya, of a wild animal. Chazir, as we said, pork is asur. Mocha de shibuta, but you have the brain of the fish called shibuta, that the experts say that has the same flavor as pork. Geruta, which is a certain kind of unclean bird. You want to know what it tastes like? Lishana de kavara, the tongue of a fish, a certain fish. Eishes ish, how about a married woman? She's asur. There's an equivalent to that too. Grusha, b'chayei bala. If she's divorced, even though her husband is still alive. In other words, so that woman, a couple minutes ago was asur. Actually, you would have to wait a while, but anyway. But a little while ago she was asur, and now she's mutter. How about an eishes ach? A brother's wife, it's asur. Brother divorced his wife, or even if the brother passed away and he has children, the other brother, survivor, cannot marry his sister-in-law. Eishes ach. It is forbidden, but there is one occasion where it's not only not forbidden, it's a mitzvah, and that's Yevama. Right? Yevama, the whole mitzvah of Yevama. Then the Gemara says kusis, which is a goya by yefas toya, but in case you're at war, there isn't a situation where yefas toya will be permissible. I'm not going to get into yefas toya; it's not applicable today. Anyway, so the one we're interested in is kavdo, blood of liver. So what's the story with liver? So we know from various sources in the Torah that there's no problem with liver as an organ. The Torah answers certain things, blood, the chelev that is burned, the mizbeach, the gitanoshe. There's no issue with the liver. The liver being like any other organ is mutter. The question is how to prepare it. What's so unique about the liver, and what makes it so difficult that there's a lot of machlekes in here, whole discussions about how to prepare it, is because the liver is all blood, and anatomically, it's all blood. It's all made up of blood. So why is it mutter? So one of the Mefarshim says that the reason why liver, after properly prepared, is mutter, even though it's all blood, is because the type of blood that the Torah forbids is dam shenishpach ala aretz kamayim. Only liquid blood that flows, that you can spill on the ground. As it says in the Pasuk, ala aretz tishbachenu kamayim, that regular blood you have to spill. In other words, you can't consume it, you can't drink it. So we learn from that the liver, that's one pshat. The liver, since it's a solid type of blood, have you ever handled it? It's solid. It's like frozen. But the consistency of it, well, I shouldn't say the consistency, the makeup of it is really blood. That's what it's made out of. somehow, if you would be able to melt it down, you'd get blood from it, or a liquid resembling blood. So this type of blood, the Torah did not have in mind to forbid. Now, since nonetheless it is full of blood, because even though it's mutter, but it's full of blood, that is where we have the machlokes and how to properly prepare it. Can salting be sufficient, like it is with other basar, to remove some of the blood that is flowing? Or do you need to do something else to it, as we do with other organs? We have tzli, by roasting it. In other words, what is necessary to make this covered kosher? So you have, for example, Rashi. Rashi says Melicha will not help. That's the way it's all based on the sugya there in the Gemara and Chulin, and how to interpret the sugya, what exactly are the circumstances, what exactly is the suffix there, what exactly are the issues there. Rashi says Melicha by itself does not help. Does not help because of the ribui hadam, because of the vast amount of blood in it. Now what we don't know yet is that true even if the covered is by itself, being cooked by itself, or is it only because you may want to cook it with other meat? And therefore the dam coming out may be a problem for other meat, because in a sense, covered really is maflit and it's not boilea. As we learned by the lave with the heart, that it's such a smooth organ, so covered in a sense too. It will not absorb from the outside so easily, but it will emit. And what is it going to be emitting? It's going to be emitting blood. And by the way, when it does emit blood that is coming out, that dam shepirish, which is a problem by regular ordinary meat, will it pose a problem here? In other words, the dam that's coming out, and if it does, it's that dam deoraisa or derabbanon.
Before we understand coming out
of the liver, right?
Meaning the blood that already exited the liver moving around or not?
No, the blood that is exiting.
Exiting.
That is
has exited. It's already outside.
It's already outside.
So
yeah.
blood's within the meat that is moving down shepirish?
Yes, but that would concern the covered itself, perhaps.
Yeah.
Not necessarily other meat.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
Concern.
Right, it can still be of concern, sure.
Even if it hasn't.
That's correct. Even though it hasn't exited. Yeah, sure.
Because your definition of the blood itself.
Yeah, because here there are cases or example of a covered being cooked on its own versus being cooked with other meat. And the concern with other meat is, of course, blood that's exiting from it. Yeah.
That has exited.
That has exited, right, correct. Yeah. So the first point we need to have in mind before we read the halacha inside is that Rashi is of the opinion, so that just we should know where the Rishonim are standing. Rashi is of the opinion that Melicha does not help. Just simply does not help the covered. It will not do any good. Because of the ribui hadam. And therefore, what will help? Only tzliya. The only way that you can eat liver, if you want to eat it, is by roasting it, barbecuing it. Which, by the way, we need to talk about another time, maybe next week, on how to properly roast it, whether you can do it in your broiler or not, whether it has to be in a barbecue, what are the concerns, how to properly broil the liver. A lot of people are not aware that it needs to be done in a certain way, otherwise, it's not kosher. Okay, so according to Rashi, that's the only way to deal with it. The Rif and the Rambam, and I think the Ran also hold pretty much the same thing. That Melicha doesn't help, and basically that's all we are left with. Even though the Rambam, as we will see, there are other suggestions, but for now what we know is that Melicha does not help. What about the dam that comes out? What is the din or the status of that dam? So the Tosfos, Rashba, Ran, and Rambam hold that this dam is dam deoraisa. So it's important to point out at this time that everybody is in agreement about the dam hasimpoinos. The liver has simponot. It has major blood vessels, major arteries, that you can call them. And any blood there is dam deoraisa, as we pointed out with the lave, with the heart too. That is blood that's coming from other places. That's not its own internal blood. And that really should be cut up and removed before you prepare the liver. So dam hasimpoinos, as we will talk a little bit about it in the other seifim, there's no question that is dam deoraisa. The only question is about the internal blood. So we have a whole bunch of Rishonim that hold that the dam that's coming out of the liver is a dam d'oraisa too. And they show it, they learn it from the Gemara too. That doesn't mean the liver is a problem. The liver by itself is okay in the way it is. In other words, the solid state in which the blood is. But once blood comes out, that blood is the rest, and that is why it's a concern. Rabbeinu Tam, Issa Veheter, the Rashal, I think the Ramah basically hold that any blood that comes out is a Rabbanan blood. It's still Asr, but it's the Rabbanan. So since everybody is in agreement, at least Legabe the Simpoinos, Legabe the major blood vessels or arteries in the liver, an additional important detail or halacha in preparing the liver is that right before you do whatever you do, in this case we will see that the minig is to tzli, not melicha, not the regular melicha, is that you still have to cut it up. And the cutting up is especially important because of the potential of blood in the simpoinos. And even if you don't have simpoinos, we still cut it up for other reasons. So that's basically the machloikas Rishonim on whether melicha helps or not. There is a shita, and that is the shita of Rabbeinu Tam, which is an important shita just to know. I guess it could come in handy occasionally. Rabbeinu Tam is Rabbeinu Tam. I mean, even though we don't hold like him, he says that melicha lemaisa helps with liver in the same way that it helps with other meat. Which means what? Which means that technically, if you want to, after you've done melicha to the kavod, you want to cook this kavod, this liver, with other basar, it would be permissible. However, not everybody, of course, holds that. And therefore, because of the machlokes, there are some Rishonim that say, including the Ramban, the Rashba, the Tur, that they say, well, there are a lot of Rishonim that don't agree with Rabbeinu Tam, but B'di'eved will go ahead and side with Rabbeinu Tam. B'di'eved. Okay, so that's important to know this B'di'eved. Rabbeinu Tam, however, does say, this is especially important if you're going to be cooking it later with other meat, that if you're going to be doing melicha to this basar, go ahead and cut it up too. How do you cut it up? Sheti va'erev. In other words, vertically, horizontally. That is the typical, that's what sheti va'erev means, like a cross. I mean, sheti va'erev, and after that, you can go ahead and salt it, and after you've salted, you can cook it with other meat. And once you've cut it, by the way, you put the cut side facing down, just to enable the blood to flow a little easier. Now, what's interesting about Rabbeinu Tam is that Rabbeinu Tam is of the opinion, that based on the way he understands the Gemara Sugya, that even melicha is not required. That's what's interesting about this shita. He says, kavod is mutar. Since we just saw that the kavod is mutar. Well, it says it's mutar. This is blood, but this is a permissible type of blood. Nothing wrong with this blood at all.
Mutar because...
No. He says me'ikar. He says me'ikar adin, it's mutar. Me'ikar adin, especially by itself. He says, remember, there's some concern about cooking it with other meat. He agrees. That's granted. But in reality, he says, me'ikar adin, kavod, the blood of the kavod is mutar, even without melicha. So therefore, if you were to, by mistake, I don't want to say by mistake because we have a halacha that says even b'di'evet, we don't hold that way, but let's say technically, if you were to just cook, not sleep, cook the kavod, the liver by itself without any melicha, without any other meat with it, in the pot by itself, the pot may be asur, as we will see in Machaber, because of the blood that came out, but then the kavod will be mutar. Why? The kavod is me'ikar adin, is mutar. And a lot of Rishonim hold like that too. Me'ikar adin. A lot of the Rishonim in the Ran, that the Ran brings down. No problem. So even though we don't go along with this Rabbeinu Tam, but that's his shita. He says basically, kavod is mutar. There's not a problem. By itself, for sure, there shouldn't be. If there is any issue, it would be cooking it with other meat. Then, of course, it could make a difference whether you salted the kavod or not, because there's a shita in Toises, not Rabbeinu Tam, that if you hold that salting helps, and you salted the kavod, then the kavod is mutar. The other meat is not.
I didn't understand your
if you hold that salting helps for the covered. Rashi says it doesn't.
The Tosfos hold it helps.
It helps for the covered itself.
So it's not a condition that they formulate. They hold it helps.
It helps for the covered, right? But not for other meat. In other words, so if you were to salt the meat and salt the covered and cook it by itself, it wouldn't be an issue. It still remains an issue for other meat.
Now that other meat
being cooked with it.
You're mentioning now after sleep.
Right.
The salting would remove this blood.
Right.
So is this other meat now in danger from any blood that might separate and come out, or is it in the liver itself, which itself is blood? We were saying the
for
liver
addition,
itself is blood.
right. For any additional blood coming out, right, it might still in the liver.
Not the liver itself is not the problem with respect to.
Yeah, because there's still, because you're cooking it, right, and the liver is blood, we are concerned about any additional blood coming out.
Right.
Whereas for the covered itself, it may be sufficient, like it would, like for any other ordinary meat.
While it's releasing, it's not absorbing.
Right. So for the covered itself, it would not be a problem because while it's releasing, it's not absorbing. But for the other meat, we don't say that.
And how do we know that it didn't stop releasing and started
But the covered, we don't have that concern. We don't have that concern, right? So
if you
is what blood?
Is
Yes.
blood.
Right.
and if you cook it with, it doesn't have to be merely touching. It's going to, if you hold that, you have an issue there.
Yeah, during the
It
cooking.
doesn't mean that you just
Well,
live next to it.
Yeah, but when meat is being cooked as opposed to when meat is being roasted, two meats are close to each other and there's heat, right? Yeah, so then the touching is an issue. When it's cooking, you don't need to do. You don't even need them to be touched, even if they're not touching. That's the concern.
There's water.
Because there's water.
Right.
Right. So that's the point
But
here.
it wouldn't matter whether it's emitting or not emitting.
Well, it is a problem that it's emitting.
If you're holding that it is being eaten,
Right.
then why does it have to emit any? Because it's down to water to Basar.
Well, we're only concerned about the dam that is exiting the cupboard, not anything that is left in the cupboard that will never come out.
The liver itself, because it's sweet but solid, would that not be a problem?
Not be a problem, right. Only what's coming out. So the way some Rishonim understand, including Tosfos, would be that there would be more of a concern with other basar being cooked with this kavod, whether it was salted. In other words, even if it was salted, kol sheken if it was not salted. Yeah. Halacha lemaisa, we will see that the Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring down, at least in the beginning, the shita of Rabbeinu Tam b'diavad. That's because he's mentioning in the very beginning about cooking it with other meat, or cooking it later. So halacha lemaisa he doesn't hold like Rabbeinu Tam. And the same thing with the Ramah. But if it's cooked by itself, but the evet, it's going to be mutter. Even though the Ramah says it's even also in that situation. So perhaps we should now read it inside and see what's going on. Hakoved, the Mechaber says in Sif Aleph, yesh bo ribui dam. There's a lot of blood in it. Lefichach lechatchilo en lo takono levashlo al yedei melicha. Therefore, ordinarily you cannot cook it in the same way you would any other meat through melicha. Elo koroi sheti ve'erev. You cut it, slice it up, down and up, vertically and horizontally. Umeniach chitucho lematon. You put the sliced side of the kavod facing down. Letzoleo, and then you roast it. Okay, so that's very interesting. That he's saying that even though you are going to be roasting it, you still need to do the cutting. You still want to cut. You still want to slice it to make sure that the blood comes out well, even though all you're going to be doing is tzeleya. All right. And then he says, sheyeroyu le'achila. In other words, how long do you roast it? So he says that it should be edible.
Who says that? The Ramah.
That's in the Ramah. Now, what's the royu le'achila? The Shach brings down, as he says it, he mentions it later on, as it is mentioned later on, that bechatzitz liyoso mikre royu le'achila. Over there it's mashma that half its roasting is sufficient. How long is half? Now they're not talking about time here. They're just saying chatzitz liyoso will be sufficient. What's interesting about this is that I saw, brought down in the Darchei Tshuva, who brings down from another sefer, that the whole tzliyosoi, at least of a liver of an animal versus of a chicken, is an hour. So chatzi tzliyosoi would be a half an hour. That the fact that we are able to use time, minutes, is something that we learned in Orach Chaim. Remember now with the Chazon Ish in Machal ben Drusoi, when you hear Hilchos Shabbos, you learn.
But he was only a third.
Right, but in Machal ben Drusoi over there. No, that's something else. Whether it's a half or a third, but there in Machal ben Drusoi, times are given, and what are those times? Those times dependent on the particular food that is being cooked. So if something takes a half an hour to cook, the Machal ben Drusoi for that would be either half or a third of that half an hour.
Rashi Rambam, right?
Right. So it does not mean that Machal ben Drusoi or Chatzi Mishula or whatever is the same for everything. We can give a certain amount of time, and that amount of time will of course depend on what is being cooked. Yeah.
But also according to the Chazon Ish, calculate the time regardless if it's correct. No, what he says is according to the one that says a third, you should bring the water to a boil.
Right.
And then
you begin the process from there.
Whereas the one that says half, you're actually talking about including the water.
Including the time.
So by it's being pretty
you
much
know,
the same time.
when you bake, they tell you preheat the oven to 250 or whatever. So that's a similar idea. You know, do you count the whole process, including the preheat? You know, this takes 45 minutes to bake. From what point? it's important to know, because the preheat can make a difference. You don't want to burn the bottom of the challah that you're baking, or the cookies that you, right? It's 6 minutes. From what point? You know, chocolate chip cookies, right? So it's important to know from what point.
How do you know these times well?
I'm paying attention when they're baking in the kitchen. Anyway, yeah.
But basically, you would only do it if you would know for this time.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, but we did actually.
Since we touched on the topic, so what is it? Is it with or without the preheat?
Yeah.
And now that you mentioned
No, we did get into that in Yore Deah, in other, I should say, in Taaruvot or in Basar about from what point to count the reticha, I think from when it's actually boiling, or from when it's starting on the water. It concerns various halacha. Basar b'challah, remember? You put in the spoon, and it's cold water. You know, you put a Melicha spoon to steer in the fleshika pot, but it wasn't cold yet. There was fire underneath the pot. You know, is it already considered hot, or did it need to be already hot? Well, obviously it needed to be hot. We know for sure it's a problem if it was hot, I say. But if it wasn't hot yet, you would have to leave it there for a little bit of time for it to be an issue. Otherwise, if you just put it in and out and it was not hot at all, then what's the question? Unless you say that it was touching the bottom. Remember that? It's touching the bottom and the bottom is hot. Well, maybe. You know, that could be another issue. You know, is the bottom hot? Well, how hot was it? You know? So obviously, if something is not very, very hot, you could definitely be makel in that situation. It wasn't hot yet. And that could happen. She just put the pot on the stove and just by mistake took the wrong spoon, but it didn't come to a boil. Well, what if it was hot but it didn't come to a boil? Does it have to come to a boil?
No.
Yeah, it's a leaded boil. Yeah, so okay. So you could be machmir if it was hot. You know, it all depends on what's cooking, what exactly you were preparing. But this is an important point because we need to know the timing. We need to know how to roast properly the liver, because one opinion says that it should be very dry to the point where the meat or the liver is dry, and some say it doesn't have to be that dry. You know, even if it's a little bit still soft, it's okay. So that's where you get chatzi. Half means that it's not completely dry. It would still be edible, and therefore it would still be sufficient to be considered sli. That's why here all he says is sheyeh roy la'achila. Yeah. So the Mechaber says, after you've done that, there's no problem. You will be able to cook it afterwards. Okay. So far, so good. Now that we've said that part of preparing a liver requires chituch, cutting it up, question is there any other way to do it? So the Ramah brings down several suggestions that are equivalent to cutting it up. If you go ahead and perforate it, make holes on it. You know, there are some, I forget the name of that utensil that's used in kitchen sometimes to make holes. If you make holes, many holes with a knife, with a fork, yeah. That would be equivalent to cutting it up. And this is interesting, he says, Inotal misham hamoro v'chatichas basar min hakoved. De'efshar ledam lazuv misham. Let's say you didn't cut it up, but what you did instead was when you prepared the liver, you cut it out together, or I should say you took out of the liver, out of that all that meat that was together, you took out the gallbladder, the morah, together with a little bit of the meat of the liver, it was attached to it. Then that enables any blood there to come out, because it's an opening, it's a cut. So he says if you did that too, then that's also sufficient. Mikol mokom im lo asa kein. If you did not do any of that, the Ramah just says make sure that after you've roasted it, noitel asimpoinos leachar etzliya umevashlo. Just remove any of the blood vessels, the arteries that are there that contain the blood, and then you can go ahead and cook it after the tzliya. So what do we see? That the chitoch is more of a chumrah. It should be done, but if it was not done, just make sure that the simpoinas, any arteries that are there, are removed. Chol ze bekovet shlema. All of this is if we're talking about an intact piece of liver. Aval kshehi chatucha and shorachum. If the liver is already cut up, you don't need anything. It's already cut up. Uchshebol lebashalo achar tzliya. And if you come to cook it after the tzliya, he says yadichenot chila achar tzliya kodem avishu. You should rinse it. Some say you rinse it because of the salt that's still on top of it. So you rinse it before you do this. After you do the tzliya, before you cook it. If you did not do the rinsing and you cooked it this way, it's okay. All right, that's the Ramah on the first part of the halacha. Comes along the mechaber and says, even though I just told you that there is no takana except for tzli, ubedi eved mutar im nisbashel levadoi. Now that's an important point. He's only saying levadoi. It's only mutar. It's mutar b'di'evet if it was cooked by itself b'kedera in a pot without sliya. Aval kedera asuro. The kedera the pot is asur. Shepoletes ve'eno bola'as, because it is poletes and it will not absorb. V'yesh misha oiser, but there are some who say it's asur. So what do we have here? We have here basically an explanation about the covet, that the covet is poletes ve'eno bolas, so there's no problem. But the gdera is a problem. V'yesh misha oiser, there are other Rishonim that say that this would be asur. Now why would they be machmer b'di'evet? So the Taz brings down here, v'yesh misha oiser, he says the Rambam is one of those, because we're choishesh svirele came the poisek rabbanon deri benuri Rabbi Elyahu benuri that covet boilas gamke, that the covet can also absorb. Roif poiskim don't hold this way. Elo Rabbi Elyahu benuri that is not boilas, but the noyagin lehachmir, just like the Ramah says. That's what the Taz says. The Ramah says, "V'chein nohagin nesor hakol." Our meaning is to say that everything is aser. V'afilo nimlecha kovet kodem yishulo, even if the kovet was salted before. So why is the meaning to aser? So the Shach brings down a completely different idea over here. It is mentioned in various places, and various Achronim bring it down too, that there's a man de Omar in the Gemara, the shluko ne'esra, ve'anan lo beki'inu mishmau sholok u'mau mevushol, kosu b'toris chatasham v'shemitzu ve'eter, aval ha'ke'ora she'ochlu ba'kovet k'sheira. All right. So he says that there is a man de'omer in the Gemara that says sholok would be osur. So even though mevushal is okay, sholok is not okay. What's sholok? There's apparently two different kinds of ways of cooking. One called mevushal and one called sholok. One is maybe perhaps more intense heat, one is less intense heat, maybe one is lesser amount of time, more amount of time, more water, less water. We're not bekim in what sholok is. But because there's one man de'omer that says sholok is osur, so we're concerned about that man de'omer, that maybe this, what was done here is sholok and not mevushal. That had it been real mevushal, medi'evad, it would be okay by itself, the covered, since all it is covered, right? Which is not a problem, right? But since there is a man de'omer that says sholok would be asur, and we don't know the difference between sholok and mevushal, that is why nohagin lesser akoil, we say it's asur. All right, comes along Sif Beis and tells us something that we've covered before, that is also one of those things that we're not familiar with. ואם חולתו בחומץ או ברויסחים ונוקה והויצי מזרקי אדם שבתוכו מן הדין מותר לבשלו אלא שגוינים אסור לעשות כן בדיעבד מותר. If you actually did chalita in vinegar or in hot water and you perforated it and took out the main blood vessels, min adin it would be okay to be mevashel, but the goinim are those that came before the rishonim. Also, they from their point of view, today we're no longer bekim and what chalita is. So they are the ones that forbid to do it. Ubediavad mutar. No, means Medina Gemara. If you knew how to do chalita, somehow chalita works wonders with meat. When we've covered this din before with chalita, remember, Ilan?
Sure.
Yeah. You know, if somehow you knew how to do chalita, you would be able to freeze the blood in its spot.
And if it doesn't move, right?
Yeah, and even though some of it remains there, it will never move. It will never move. Then it will not be a dam that is a problem.
The whole trick is that we do that procedure, otherwise.
Apparently, yeah, it defeats the purpose.
We don't know how to do.
Yeah, and here he says chalita can be done, by the way, with vinegar, which is interesting that he mentions it here, with vinegar, or with boiling water. And this is something that some communities knew how to do, or some communities did that as part of their cooking. Somehow, I think it involved just a very brief dip into very, very boiling water, or in this case vinegar, and somehow that short or brief immersion would singe or dry up or freeze the blood in its place, and then you would have no concerns whatsoever. As the Mechaber says, you would be able to cook it after that, just that the Goyim prohibited. But the Ebed, he says it's mutter, which is interesting. But the Ebed, how do you know you did it right? You did it right.
Includes the case where you are uncertain if it was done correctly. I think the idea is it was done correctly in our line on that.
Right.
But if it was done correctly, then the
Correctly, well, obviously, yeah. That's what he means.
But if it's doubtful,
No.
it was done correctly,
Yeah, no.
then
No, this one means somehow you know for sure that what you did was right.
yeah. Someone who's an expert.
Because as Gerah brings down over here, the Geoinim only answered lechatchila, not b'diavad. So somehow, if you knew what you were doing, it would be okay. Shach also says that even the ones who say that the Meishish Mishoish and Sif Aleph, here it was already nechot, that no more dam will come out of it. What's interesting is that in the Torah's Chatas, he says that even b'diavad chalita is also. So the Shach says, why don't you say it? Why don't you mention it here too? Why didn't the Ramah say anything here? If over there he says it's also b'diavad. Obviously, because we don't know how to do it properly. So, I mean,
You don't even need to
you don't even need to mention it, perhaps. Yeah. Okay. So before we go on, just a little bit of an analysis of what we just covered in the kriya, in the cutting up the liver. Not only does the liver not only does it have to be done bitzli, there's also the halacha or the detail that it should be cut up. So what is the reason for cutting it up? Rashi simply says that the cutting up is necessary for preparing it for the tzli. in order for the tzli to work well, you need to cut it up. Over there, from Rashi, it's mashma. It doesn't make a difference whether you cook it or not. Just even if all you do is tzli, it's necessary for the tzli. Tosfos over there says that no, the whole idea of cutting it up is because there are people who even after they roast it, they like to cook it. And because of that, we need to cut it up well, because eventually when you cook it, some more blood may come out. What about if you don't cook it? Aren't you concerned about the little blood coming out? No. That little blood that comes out a little bit is not a big deal anyway. In other words, that little blood that still remains, that does not come out, it's dami vorm shelo pirish. In other words, if all you do is tzli, and you still claim that there's a little bit left over, yeah, but that little left over did not come out, did not move. Whereas once you cook it, you will get it to move. There may still be a little bit there. So therefore, Tosfos says that is the purpose of cutting it up, cutting up the liver before you do tzli, just in case eventually you want to make bishul. Rabbeinu Tam, he's the one that said Melicha is perfectly okay. He says the cutting it up is for Melicha to do the job properly, in order for Melicha to work. And therefore, in order to enable you to cook it later. So you're going to salt it in order for the salt to work. You want to cut it up in the same way we do it with certain other organs that need to be cut up. The Rambam, even though we don't do chalita today, he says that was intended for chalita, I believe. In other words, if you wanted to do chalita properly, it would require you to do the cutting up of the liver. Apparently, you would not necessarily need to cut it up if you were to just roast it. So therefore, since we don't do chalita today, all we do is really roast it, lemaisa, you don't really need cutting it up. The reason we do it is, again, we may end up cooking it afterwards. Later on, we will see Sif Gimel, the Mechaber says, even if you don't cook it, you should still cut it up a little bit. That's because over here he's machmir like another sheep. But lemaisa, anytime you just roast liver and you don't cook it, it really does not require to be cut up. We do it anyway. Because people end up cooking it. If you know for sure you're not going to cook it, I think the Ramah, as we'll see later on, is mekel. You don't have to cut it up at all. So it depends what you intend to do, how you intend to eat the liver. As far as the detail that the Ramah tells us that in lieu of cutting it up, can you take a fork or a knife and start making holes in it? I saw that the Pri Chodesh holds that that's completely acceptable. The same thing with the Isur V'Heter, the Minchas Yaakov. But if you look at the Shach, the Pri Megodim, the Chavas Das, they say that the holes in the liver is only b'di'evet. The Chatchila, you shouldn't make holes, you should actually cut it up. Marshal makes a compromise. He says, if the chituch is me'ikar adin, when is chituch, cutting up the liver, me'ikar adin? When you plan to cook it afterwards, right? That's when it was a concern. So when the chituch is me'ikar adin, don't go ahead and make holes. Then go ahead and actually cut it up. When the chituch is not me'ikar adin, it's just to, you're going to do completely tzli, and it's just a little bit it's more of a chumrah to cut it up a little bit. Then it is sufficient to make holes in it. Is there a difference between the liver of a chicken or a cow here? The Taza seems to be saying that there really should not be any difference between the liver of a chicken, or by the way a goose, or the larger one. They all similarly, lechatchil at least, require chituch, cutting up. It appears in the Pri Megodim, it appears that he says that you can definitely be lenient like the Ramah when it comes to chicken liver. You don't have to cut it up. It's sufficient if it's so small, you can make hole. You can take a knife and make little holes in it. But as we said, this mainly concerns if you cook it. I believe, from what I recall, that if you just plan, like most people today, I think they roast the liver, they don't cook it, that's not a problem. But as we will see, there is still a minhag. We do still salt liver. We do a little bit of salting on top of the liver, not as much as we would regular meat, but that's a separate din. But cutting it up is only if you plan to cook it. As the Mechaber says, so in Halacha Gimel, reading it from the inside, litzli, sorry chaticha. Why do you need a chaticha if I'm only roasting? Mishum dam some pointers. So he basically emphasizes that the main reason why you would need, even with tzli, cutting it up, because of the dam that are in the blood vessels. If you did not cut it up before the tzli, you can cut it up afterwards. What about the blood inside? That's not an issue, but you still have to remove it. You still have to take it off. And that's the Ramah. The ain't tzorich letzli shum chaticha klal. If you're going to do tzli, you don't need any chaticha klal. V'chen noyagin afilo lechatchila today. That's basically our custom today. That if you're going to do plain tzliya, you don't have to cut it up whatsoever. The Chaber goes by the shita that you would have to cut it up a little bit because of the dam of the simpoinus. Obviously, if you're dealing with a piece of liver where there's no dam simpoinus, or as we said before, if the liver is already cut up the way you get it from the store, you don't have to worry about it. When you're buying, you're usually not buying an entire liver, especially meat liver. You're buying it cut up, and if it's already cut up, it's not an issue. If in fact it's the whole thing, then that of course lechatchila please me karatin. Even though you're going to roast it, you should cut it up. Or in the case of the Mechaber, where he says there's dam some pointos, if there are some pointos, that they would have to be removed. If they were not removed, you can remove them afterwards. Just one more interesting idea, and that is why I said before, it's always good to keep Rabbeinu Tam in mind. The Shach explains, or clarifies, I should say, the Ramah. When the Ramah says v'chen noyagin lesser akol, if the tzli was cooked by itself, because we don't hold like that, we don't hold like Rabbeinu Tam, that even b'di'evet, if it was cut up, he brings down the Torah's chatos b'shem de maharai. If it turns out that whoever asked a shaila to somebody, and that Rav was matir, by mistake of course, he says it's okay, we can follow Rabbeinu Tam, that the melicha was sufficient, and the liver was already cooked, that you don't take it back, it's mutter, if it was already cut up. That's why I said before, it helps sometimes to keep this in mind, that even according to the Ramah, who says that the halacha is it's also that we don't follow that shita, if in fact somebody somehow said it was permissible, it was already cooked, we don't take it back. And we don't say it's treif. This is based on, of course, on Rabbeinu Tam. If it was salted and it was cut up, based on that shita, because the Mechaber himself is only talking about being cooked by itself. But the ever within this basha levado b'kdeira below tzliya. Whereas the case of Rabbeinu Tam, remember, is even if it was cooked up with other meat, once it was salted and it was cut up, it would have to be cut up. Okay, and it was salted, since there is such a shita that holds that covered in reality is not a problem, and there's some that say that melicha does help the covered. So if you did it right, b'di'evet, or if b'di'evet, or there was somebody said that it was okay, it's okay. But b'di'evet, we hold that it's not good. You wouldn't be able to use it if somebody just went ahead and cooked the liver. So when somebody buys liver today, and we'll get a little bit more into details next time, Mitzvah Hashem, on how to properly prepare it, lemaisa. But when somebody today goes to the store, he has to be on the lookout for the following. Liver, regardless of which liver it is today not always broiled at the Schlachthaus or wherever it is that they're packaging it. There was a time that they broiled it. And you can see broiled liver. If you bought liver, you can see it's very, very dark, it's very, very brown, it's pretty dry. And if you look at liver that is not broiled, you should see pretty much something bloody in that package. So people should know better that if they're buying liver that has not been broiled, and they don't pay attention, not kashered, they should know that this liver cannot be cooked. In order to properly, in other words, to eat it, to prepare it, you would have to broil it in such a way that that is acceptable to broil it. And that's what happens today. Sometimes these packages you have raw liver that has not been boiled. And now, do people cook it? Well, let's say they don't cook it. Let's say they broil it. You still have to know how to broil it in a place where the blood will be able to drain off. And which brings us to the question of our broilers today, according to at least some opinions, will not qualify as a good place for broiling it. The best broiling place is an open spit, like a barbecue, where the blood can easily drain off. But if it's sitting on its own blood, it will be similar to melicha in a kli she'eino menukav, which we'll talk about next time. There's a question of what happens if the liver is wrapped in paper. Does that constitute a kli she'eino menukav? Right? Usually we're not going to broil the liver wrapped in paper, but sometimes it's an issue because, as I said last time, the liver or the various intestines and organs are sometimes left inside the chicken in a plastic bag. And then for sure, it doesn't have anywhere for the blood to go. Not only is that a problem if you salted it that way, it's a problem also if you took the whole chicken and you broiled it that way. So imagine broiling the whole thing while the liver is still inside the little bag, as opposed to the liver just being inside, but not in the bag. Okay, that's a little bit different. It hasn't been removed. Okay, that's possible. So these are little things that sometimes people don't pay attention on because sometimes they took out the organs, yeah, but they don't want to how do you say it, make you pay for something and not get it. So they put it back in, but they put it back in a plastic bag. We took care of it. We took it out, cleaned it for you, and put it back. We didn't throw it out. You still can get your liver. It's in there. Yeah. And then the balabosa just cooks the chicken and then doesn't realize it until later on. Oh no, the liver was still there, and it's bloody liver. The heart could have been still in there, and this, of course, would present a problem for the chicken and perhaps sometimes for other food that was cooked. But what did we say last time about the heart? The heart of the chicken, at least, would not present a problem. Why? Because there's always 60 times in a chicken keneged the heart. So if there's enough in the chicken keneged the whole heart, so okay. So kol shekain, no other foods would be a problem. Even the chicken itself would be mutar. Yeah, but what happens if there's liver, and then there's blood, So it can become very complicated. So obviously, it's important to examine. If you buy a whole chicken, if you buy pieces, it's never new. But if you buy a whole chicken, you always want to make sure you check the inside before you decide what you want to do. All right, I guess we can stop over here and continue.